All right, thank you, Kate. My name is Jeff Wadolter. Welcome to the American Indian and Alaska Native Behavioral Health webinar series. Today, Avis Garcia will be presenting Vicarious Trauma, Self-Care for Native American Behavioral Health Providers. This training series is brought to you by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center. We are part of a larger ATTC network, which also includes 10 regional centers and a network coordinating office. To learn more, you can visit our website, which is available in the contact box below. Our center is a NADAC certified educational provider, and we'd be happy to provide you with CEUs for a $15 fee. The CEU request form is available for download in the Files pod in the webinar screen, and I will also be sending this form in a follow-up email to everyone who attends. Immediately following today's webinar, you will be redirected to our GPRA evaluation. SAMHSA asks that we evaluate our events in order to provide improved performance assessment and accountability, and this survey will ask about your satisfaction with the event and will take less than 5 minutes to complete. We'd really appreciate you taking the time to fill this out, and we thank you in advance for helping us to improve our programs. Participants will be muted for the duration of this webinar, but you can use the Q&A pod to share your questions and comments, and we will address questions at appropriate points during the presentation. Today's webinar is presented by Avis Garcia. Dr. Garcia is an enrolled member of the Northern Arapaho Nation and affiliated with the Eastern Shoshone Tribe of Wyoming. She has a doctorate in counselor education and supervision and is a licensed professional counselor and licensed addiction therapist. She is also an advocate of education in Indian country, a resource provider for promoting cultural and enhancement of evidence-based practices and practice-based evidence of treatment approaches for Native American children and their families who have been exposed to trauma. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Garcia.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for my slides to load here. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the webinar that I'm presenting today. I have been asked a few times to do a similar presentations on the Wind River Reservation where I'm from. I still consult with both of the tribes on the Wind River Reservation, mainly in the substance abuse arena, and now I'm starting to get calls to come in and talk about trauma. Pretty popular topic in the behavioral health industry. Go ahead and get started on these slides here. Today we'll define vicarious trauma, secondary traumatic stress, compassion fatigue, burnout, resilience, and vicarious resilience. Discuss how working with traumatized population affects helping professionals like ourselves. Identify strategies that enhance personal and professional resilience, and describe some key components for you to all create your own self-care plans. This is a quote that I got out of a book that I've done some research called Trauma Stewardship. I have it listed here. If not, I'll get it to you guys in a bit here. This quote is the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. Why should we study vicarious trauma, vicarious resilience, and self-care? Because we matter. It's our quality of life. We often prioritize the needs of our clients over our own needs. And what is the alternative to self-care? Vicarious trauma can be harmful to us and to our loved ones, colleagues, agency, and our clients without our even being aware of it. My study continued as helping professionals working with people who may be experiencing trauma or have gone through trauma. We are at risk of engaging in incompetent or unethical professional behavior unconsciously. Yes, that's without our even being aware of it. So it's important to attend webinars and do some personal research on your own self. You can prevent or address vicarious trauma. Awareness of the possibility of vicarious resilience may make it easier to achieve, and bring conscious attention to vicarious resilience may strengthen it. Vicarious trauma and resilience both are seen as natural and normal processes that can develop in the context of trauma work, can simultaneously occur in any given trauma worker, helper, or clinician. Passion satisfaction is also related to vicarious resilience. This is looking at the positive aspects of helping, getting pleasure and satisfaction from helping those who utilize our caregiving systems. Compassion fatigue. These are the negative aspects of helping, related to providing care. Be like burnout, work-related trauma, known as secondary traumatic stress, is a condition characterized by a gradual lessening of compassion over time, and normal displays of chronic stress resulting from caregiving work that one chooses to do. Burnout and secondary traumatic stress. These are the negative aspects of helping. They can be related to providing care, system, work with colleagues, work-related trauma, and burnout. Compassion fatigue versus burnout. Compassion fatigue is not burnout. Burnout is associated with the stress and hassles involved in your work. It's cumulative and relatively predictable, and frequently a vacation or a change of job helps a great deal. Passion fatigue is very different. It's a state of tension and preoccupation with the individual or cumulative trauma of clients, manifested in one or more ways, including re-experiencing the traumatic event, avoiding and numbing of reminders of the event, and persistent arousal. This is a definition of stress from the Webster's Dictionary that says pressure exerted upon an object can either strengthen it or weaken it. So depending on how one is equipped to handle stress, it can cause you to have a lot more problems, or it can make you a stronger person. This is a stress curve that looks at the performance of how stress can affect us. And if you look at the curve on the left-hand side, there's a performance where there's too little stress, there's not much stress. It says inactive and laid back. And then as the stress increases, the optimum stress is fatigue. You're starting to feel tired. Too much stress can lead you to exhaustion, all those negative physical effects that we want to try to avoid by taking better care of ourselves. Too much stress causes anxiety, panic, anger, and breakdown. Your body also responds to stress. The body and brain are alarmed and alert response to a threatening situation, such as you can see here that it's also known as a fight, flight, or freeze. Talks about your body. We all know when we feel stressed, we feel our heart rate go up, maybe our breathing gets more intense, our muscles may tense up. So there's a lot of our body responds to stress. It's our natural defense against any danger. Cumulative stress. The more we pile it up, the worse it gets. I do a lot of counseling, and I tell people when you have problems and you don't talk to anyone about them, find find some way to manage your stress, it just builds up and builds up to a point that it's toxic for you. Other sources of trauma, they can stem from human behavior, which is homicide, sexual assault, assault and attack, war, natural events, hurricane, earthquakes, floods and fires, on the job, fight or physical attack, threat from physical harm or an accident. And if you can look closer at this tree, there's childhood abuse or neglect, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, grief and loss, war and other forms of violence, witnessing acts of violence, cultural, intergenerational, and historical trauma. And working in the substance abuse field, trauma just comes along with it. I feel in my own personal experience, about 90 to 95% of the clients that come in for substance abuse treatment are dealing with some sort of trauma. This may not be their first traumatic experience. They may have been through several. And the very top of this tree here says child abuse or neglect. And sometimes these situations aren't intentional. I have a very dear friend of mine. She's a Mescalero Apache friend of mine that I've known for years. As we got to know each other, I learned that her mother had some mental illness problems, and that she was also raised by her grandparents like I was. And I just thought to put that out there because some people might think people intentionally abuse their children. When some people have mental illnesses, they aren't even aware of how they are neglecting their children. So sometimes we need to be mindful of that. What makes an event traumatic? It involves threat, real or perceived, to one's physical or emotional well-being. It's overwhelming, results in intense feelings, leaves one feeling helpless, and changes the way the person understands the world and themselves. Defining traumatic stress is the response to a traumatic event where one is the victim or witness. Repeated stressful or traumatic events can chronically elevate the body's stress response. You have experienced a traumatic event through crisis over and over, you may still be experiencing or experience later some strong emotional or physical reaction. It's very common and quite normal for people to experience these reactions. It's pretty common to post-traumatic stress disorder. Vicarious trauma or secondary traumatic stress, it's a transformation of the helper's inner experience resulting from empathic engagement with client's trauma material. Like I said, working in the substance abuse field, a lot of times I've had clients disclose stories that we were probably at the end of their treatment, so I now screen for traumas early on instead of waiting to hear about them at the end of treatment. Like I said, it mirrors symptoms of PTSD and depression experienced those who were directly traumatized and can emerge suddenly, also known as compassion fatigue, which also creates a sense of powerlessness and disruption. It develops over time. It's a cumulative result of helping many clients in challenging circumstances. It can, however, develop quickly when a professional responds to a case that is especially traumatic for them. The symptoms of secondary traumatic stress may have a rapid onset associated with a particular traumatic event, can affect our thinking, how we view ourselves and the world, our safety, trust and control, sense of independence, even our self-esteem, and our ability to be emotionally intimate with others. Ability to empathize is critical for doing this work. We overemphasize without appropriate boundaries that can also put us at risk for vicarious trauma. Signs and symptoms of vicarious trauma, some changes you might notice: no time or energy for yourself, disconnection from loved ones, social withdrawal, increased sensitivity to violence, sense of personal safety and control, cynicism, general despair and hopelessness, and nightmares. At one time, I also worked as a domestic violence advocate, and a lot of times I would get happy to help with client and go back to help the next day and find out that they had already gone back to the situation that we helped them get out of. So those types of things are really hard, and sometimes we're working so much we don't stop and think. Others point out, in my personal experience, my kids were the ones that were working too much. Can we do we have to make an appointment to see you? And it was my own kids that gave me that wake up call to realize I was just working myself too much. Some contributing factors be the nature of the work, the nature of the clientele, cumulative exposure to trauma material, organizational context, social and cultural context. So for those of you that work in substance abuse work or domestic violence or emergency rooms, this is where you're going to encounter a lot of the stories from clients who seek services. For the individual, some contributing factors could be a personal history, your personality and defensive style, your coping style, your current life context, your training and professional history, supervision, and personal therapy. So it's real important. I come, well, I say my family had a lot of alcoholism. That's what brought me to the field of substance abuse treatment. I wanted to learn how to help. And knowing that I come from an alcoholic family places me at a higher risk to an alcoholic myself or other type of addiction problem. So being aware of where you come from, and I would say education has been the greatest resilience factor. The more I learn about how to handle people and their trauma, it will help me. And I even get personal therapy myself. Examples of vicarious trauma, personal, physical. I mentioned this earlier when we showed the picture of the fight flight reaction. You can even have headaches, fatigue, aches, have emotional problems, feelings of powerlessness, numbness, anxiety, anger, severe emotional distress. Behavioral could be irritability, sleep, appetite changes, isolating yourself from friends and family, having nightmares, being moody, easily startled or frightened. Spiritual could be a loss of purpose, loss of meaning, questioning goodness versus evil. Cognitive really affects how you think, your diminished concentration, imagery, self doubt, relational, decreased interest in intimacy or sex, isolation from your friends and family. And I also talk about for dealing with children, people might work with them in the classroom and not even be aware that the students are experiencing trauma, the behaviors that they may be exhibiting. So it's always good to really check out how they're doing because a lot of young people don't have the experience. Professional examples could be your work performance. It could be decrease in quality and quantity of your work, low motivation, avoiding tasks, or working too hard, or being too perfectionistic, being forgetful. Your staff morale can decrease, feel undervalued, unappreciated, disconnected. Professional
Dr.
effects
Garcia,
more is
could I
yes.
interrupt just one moment? We had someone mention that your voice is fading in and out a little bit, and I was wondering if there might be an option to either have the wherever the microphone is be closer to you, or we also could try increasing the volume, which is something I could talk you
Okay.
through a minute.
Okay.
So the
is there anything? Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Oh, at the microphone icon on the top, there is a little arrow button, and
Okay.
then there should be an option to adjust microphone volume. And so you can turn it up there. Do you see that option?
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, that's better. That's better for me.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize that was happening.
No, that's great. I think it varies depending on how people are listening, but I think it sounds great now. So thank you.
Okay, thanks for showing me that. Okay, some of the professional effects, relational, you can feel detached and withdrawn from coworkers, have poor communication, conflict, impatience, intolerance of others, sense of being the only one who can do the job, and behavioral, calling out, arriving late, overworking yourself, poor follow through. When you want to weigh the effects on your personal life versus your professional life, it does affect us physically, behaviorally, emotionally, spiritually, and cognitively and relationally. Professionally, it affects our performance, our morale, our ability to relate to others, and our behavior. Some risk factors I mentioned earlier was our own personal trauma history, pre-existing psychological disorders, being young, isolation, an inadequate support system, and having any loss in the last 12 months. Professionally could be a lack of supervision, high percentage of trauma survivors on your caseload, little experience, worker and organization mismatch, lack of professional support system, and inadequate orientation or training for the role. Self-care is what people do for themselves to establish and maintain health and to prevent and deal with illness. It's a broad concept encompassing hygiene, nutrition, lifestyle, socioeconomic factors, and self-medication. Resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or even significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, workplace or financial stressors. It means bouncing back from difficult situations. Vicarious resilience involves the process of learning about overcoming adversity from the trauma survivor and the resulting positive transformation and empowerment through their empathy and interaction. The impact of vicarious resilience gives you a greater perspective and appreciation of your own problems. You'll be more optimistic, motivated, efficacious, and re-energized, increased sense of hope, understanding, and belief in the possibility of recovery from trauma and other serious challenges. A profound sense of commitment to and finding meaning from the work that we do. It's important to acknowledge the positive, being optimistic, what was good, positive despite the trauma that was experienced, being at the right place at the right time, someone was able to help, training made a difference, good teamwork, and what did you learn for future reference? It's good to debrief when you encounter these situations. Self-care isn't everything. Vicarious trauma is an occupational challenge for those who work with trauma survivors. Organizations have an ethical mandate of a duty to train wherein workers are taught about the potential negative effects of the work and how to cope. Vicarious trauma does not have to last forever. It can be disruptive and distressing, and rare to follow up with a full-blown vicarious traumatic situation. It can be prevented, it can be addressed and overcome. One can achieve vicarious transformation as well. Often people ask me if there's a way we can measure vicarious trauma, compassion satisfaction, and compassion fatigue. This is one instrument that I've attached in the files here. That it's a real quick assessment that you can use for yourself or for your staff. So it's attached here for you to use if you want to take a look at that. Because of the time, we don't have time to go over that. Organizational strategies. Creating a healthy work environment, providing supportive leadership, providing quality supervision, debriefing staff, hosting staff and team meetings, retreats, formal and informal socialization, encouraging formal and informal peer support, providing training, education, and orientation to the organization and the role, not just putting people in the job and expecting them to figure it out. Encourage staff health and wellness, such as practices and programs and policies. The tribal program back home before I had left had added some time to the day. It was 30 minutes every other day for staff to use to go for a walk or to go to the gym or however they chose to use it so that it could help with their own personal wellness. What is vicarious resilience? It's a relatively new concept developed by Hernandez, Gangzi, and Engstrom based on their research with psychotherapists who treated victims of political violence and further developed in their research with torture and treatment clinicians. It builds on resiliency. Resilience is frequently described as a defense mechanism that makes it possible for people to thrive when confronted by adversity. Survivors of trauma are able to survive through their strategies of coping by relying on successful adaptive processes that are developmental and relational in nature. Vicarious resilience continued. It's the process of helpers learning about overcoming adversity from the trauma survivors that they work with, the resulting positive transformation and empowerment in those helpers through their empathic engagement with stories of trauma and resilience of their clients. It's like vicarious trauma, but in a more positive and healing direction. Self-care, this is the ability to engage in human rights work without sacrificing other important parts of your life, the ability to maintain a positive attitude towards the work despite the challenges. Self-care can also be understood as a practitioner's right to be well, safe, and fulfilled. Self-care assessment. I've attached a worksheet in the handouts. There's a conference handout. If you look at that, it covers a lot more information than I'm able to share with you today. But it covers physical self-care, psychological self-care, emotional, spiritual, and workplace or professional. You can get more information from there. What gets in the way of self-care? Knowledge of importance of self-care versus implementation. Lack of proactive plans and actions to implement self-care. So this has been there for a while, but a lot of people who are in charge of working with people or even the workers themselves tend to overlook this. What brought it to my attention was the state certification for substance abuse gave us this list of training that all staff have to have yearly, and trauma was on the list. Self-care strategies in your personal life, physical, psychological and emotional, behavioral, interpersonal and spiritual, your workplace and professional life, being able to balance that, personal and professional awareness and regulation. Some intervention strategies on a professional level would be supervision and consultation. I personally have an open door policy for my staff to come in whenever they need to see me to talk about some challenging clients they may be working with or clients themselves. Scheduling client load and distribution. Again, you want to look to see how much work everyone is doing and do they have too much or could somebody take on a little more, but being careful not to overload the staff. Balancing a variety of tasks, education, giving and receiving, so the more education you can give to your staff, the better, and your workspace. Organizational could be support from your colleagues, work relationships, forums to address the issue, supervision availability, respect for your staff and clients, and resources, mental health benefits, space, and time. Workplace agency strategies, principles of safety and empowerment, normalize countertransference and secondary stress and burnout reactions, have open communication, multidisciplinary case conferences, exchanging ideas and information to support one another, weekly supervision sessions, mentoring new professionals, varied work duties, and support continuing education. Personal interventions could be making your own personal life a priority, getting some personal counseling, increasing your leisure activities, physical, creative, spontaneous, and relaxation, spiritual well-being. Nurture all aspects of yourself, emotional, physical, spiritual, and intellectual, and pay attention to your health. In all realms, there's mindfulness and self-awareness, self-nurturance, being able to balance your work and play and rest, meaning and connection. This is the medicine wheel that I've used in substance abuse treatment, but I've also applied it to my own personal wellness and used it in staff presentations as well. Everybody uses this, every tribe uses this a different way, and this is just what worked for me. I've also attached a medicine wheel worksheet. I used it in substance abuse treatment with my clients so that they could all create their own wellness plan. So doing this with your clients is a good intervention as well. The sweat lodge. This is commonly used in a lot of treatment facilities and is starting to come out and research the benefits of going to a sweat lodge. And both of our substance abuse treatment programs on the reservation have sweat lodges, and they're used on a weekly basis, and it's helpful for everyone. So like I said, I can only speak from being a Northern Arapaho. I'm not sure how other tribes handle their sweat lodge ceremony. Making a personal commitment to wellness. Why? Because I hurt, because I matter, because my clients matter, because the work I do matters, because the profession matters, and because I must. Yourself and one's work. How? Don't do it alone. Get a buddy or a group. Do it a day at a time. Find some positive outlets. Do something in each realm. Look at that medicine wheel and see where you're kind of lacking on some areas that you could improve. Make one change at a time and be realistic. Increasing your mindfulness and acceptance. Making time and space for what you love to do. Don't forget and don't give up. And anticipate some obstacles and have a prevention plan. Self-management, some mindfulness activities, could be meditation, spirituality, prayer, all of that, again, we find in the sweat lodge and ceremony. Movement, dance, exercise, walking. CrossFit has been a big thing on our reservation that's made a huge difference for a lot of people that attend. Hiking, yoga, running, sports, whatever gets you moving. If you can move at least 30 minutes, 2-3 times a week, that's enough. You don't have to do hours and hours. And rhythm, music, singing, and drumming. Again, a lot of our ceremonies involve all of that, or just going to powwows. Art and creativity. Many people like to bead and sew and draw and paint. This was a group that we had at the substance abuse program I worked at, and the staff were able to take time off of work and participate as well along with the clients, and it worked out really well. Many of them enjoyed it. I saw them make star quilts and beaded earrings that they could sell, so a lot of stuff you can do for yourself as well. Next steps in my personal life. My next step is fill in the blank. My professional life, my next step in my organization, see a typo there, sorry, should say my next step is, and I am making a commitment to myself and to take these steps. On that, one of the handouts I gave you, there is a self-care worksheet that you can use with your clients as well. One thing that's real popular and traditional Native culture is storytelling. That's how we learn things. And so being able to listen to people tell their stories. I went to a training one time, and one of the ladies had told me she would hear someone's traumatic story and she would ask them to tell her again and to tell them again, to tell them 4 times. And she thought the more they were able to talk about it, the better able they were to get through it and move on. I'm at the end here for some questions. If anyone has any questions? Sorry, I went kind of fast because there was a time, we have a time limit here to meet. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what brought me to do the work that I do myself. Is I started out, I share with a lot of the people, especially my presentations, of what brought me to working with trauma and substance abuse was having grown up in a home where my own mother was an alcoholic, and she got involved in some domestic abuse situations that I witnessed as a child. And a lot of people don't stop to think that it also affects children. And okay, I see someone has a question here, so I'm going to answer their question right away. It talks about addressing the hostile work environment. And sadly, I just got a message from a friend this morning who's going through something similar. And for me, that would be people in your work environment that are not working together as a team. And sometimes this is why I say we need to look at ourselves and how we're treating other people and how we expect to get treated. So the workplace is often one of those places that happens. And I've had this happen to me as well. And sometimes this leadership can not be well, and some of us are not well. So it's good to be aware of that. And I guess my experiences with leadership is I took a job off the reservation right out of my master's program when I first became a counselor. And we had a supervisor there who told me, she modeled to me everything a supervisor shouldn't be, basically. And a lot of times I felt that I was singled out because I was the only ethnic minority in the company at the time. And sometimes the only way out of that is to leave. And suggestions for lateral violence. Sadly, I've kind of experienced this as well, even on my own reservation, of being denied opportunities. And it's just looking at ourselves and how we handle it. And the only way I've been able to handle that myself is through prayer. Like I say, the Sweat Lodge has helped me tremendously to continue the work that I do with the people that I do, because this is what I chose to do. And for some people, this might not be the place for them. And in a hostile work environment, there should be a grievance policy or procedure for each employee to follow. And sometimes not even that works. My own personal experience, I left. I found another job and moved away. I went back to school. The last time this happened to me, I actually took it to my business council, and they said they knew a lot of that was going on and they didn't know what to do. So fortunately, I don't know, things just fell into place for me, and I went back to school and got my PhD. That's how I got away from it. It was really a refreshing start for me to focus my time and energy elsewhere so that I could just continue to better myself and walk away from that. As I was talking earlier about children, when I first returned to the reservation to do counseling, I volunteered to counsel the kids in the juvenile justice system. And at that time, it was shortly after the methamphetamine epidemic had hit our reservation, and a lot of children were removed from their homes, A lot of their parents, even grandparents, went to prison. So our group homes were overloaded with children that had no place to go. So I did spend a lot of my time with those young people, and the more time I spent with them, they hadn't even realized themselves that they'd been traumatized. Some of these kids were used for sex, for drug deals, and some of them saw a lot of really horrible things. So even just having their whole family taken away and sent off to prison was very traumatic for them. So it was really being able to know you're there to support these people and that you're there to help, just for them to have a safe place to be and being a caring person. Yes, I do present to different tribes. The presentation that I shared with you briefly today includes some workshop pieces to it, and we could do it through webinar. But everything I have here today, even this presentation, I think the slides will be available to you. I mean, I tell people take it, use it. I'm not one of those that's going to sit here and tell people to give me money so you can have it. I'm not like that. If there's something I can help, I'll gladly share.
I just want to mention, since Dr. Garcia brought it up, that we will be sending the slides to everyone, and the handouts that she provided as well, since she provided these helpful handouts that go along with this. We'll send that out in the follow-up email that will go out to everyone.
But I think all of you that are out there working and helping these people, it's always good to take a moment and give yourself credit for doing the work that you do, and for this is a tough job to do, and it's not easy for everyone. Like I said, I've encountered people who ask me, how I do what I do, and I've had we have a lot of peer support specialists now, and the state is even requiring me to use peer support specialists. And I've had, as I was working alongside these peer support specialists, um, they would often come to me and say, I'm not a counselor, and they're telling things that I don't feel I'm able to handle. So I guess one recommendation I have is basic counseling skills for those that are in the helping profession. Because I told them, just because you don't have a degree doesn't mean you can't help. But a lot of times these people just need you to listen. They just want somebody who will hear them and let them know they're being heard. I'm seeing a question here, suggestions for providers whose employers have never addressed vicarious trauma. What would be the best way to bring it up? I think the best way to bring it up would be to do a simple presentation such as this. Um, there's a really good book that I have. It's called Trauma Stewardship, an everyday guide to caring for self while caring for others. It is by Laura Vandernoot Lipsky. Let me see if I can type it in here. There it is. There's the information on the book. I met a lady when I went to Palm Springs in December, and she told me they had a bunch of these books on the shelf. And so I tell them, has anybody read it? Maybe you could start a little book club at work where maybe you read a chapter a week and you follow it up with a discussion of what you got out of it. Okay, for your presentation. Oh yeah, good comment by Brian. I hear this so much, and I struggle with it a lot myself personally. I just left an agency where I was probably the only person that wasn't, not to get political here, a Trump supporter. And so a lot of times I had to bite my tongue and keep it to myself, knowing that most of the people I was working with at the other agency I just worked at were all supporters of Trump. And it's on the media daily. And we see it happening mainly with people of color. And it's a real tough thing. And it's not anything we can, I guess it's just learning to cope with it on our own. And for me, sometimes just shutting social media off, shutting that Facebook off, not seeing what people have to post on there because it will fuel my fire. You know, I watch CNN constantly. It's I'm always keeping on top of the news, and sadly, I see what's happening to a lot of people, including our own Native people, with what's going on politically nowadays. And all I can do is, like I say, I go back to my traditional ways of how I handle things, and that's through prayer. And all we can do is pray and hope for the best and take care of ourselves and take care of the people and our families, make sure everybody's okay, checking on our elders. It's a really tough thing for us to be going through right now, and that's a really good question that I don't have a lot of answers to, but gives me something to do some research on. Any other questions, anybody? I guess if that's it, thank you guys for taking your time again to attend this webinar, and ask yourself every day if you have what it takes to do what this job takes. Are you being your best self? Putting my email here. There's my email. It's probably one of the best ways to contact me, and you're welcome.
Okay, well, I just want to say thank you so much to Dr. Garcia for sharing on this really interesting and difficult topic for everyone who's working in behavioral health, and for sharing some of your personal experience with us. And yeah, it's great to have resources for keeping ourselves healthy, and so I really appreciate that. And I just want to remind everybody that we'll be sending out a follow-up email that will have a link to the recording of today's webinar if you want to view it again, or share it with some of your colleagues. And then handouts of the presentation will be included, and as well as the handouts that Dr. Garcia included for the presentation. And we'll also be redirecting you to our short survey after this closes out. And so we would love to hear your thoughts and what you thought of our the topics we're covering, of the how it was run itself. And so please, we would love to have your feedback. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple minutes, the link to that survey will also be in the email in case you don't get it. But thanks again for joining us, and with that, we'll close out here, and I hope you all have a great day.